Hello everyone, it's Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and welcome to the first episode of Spotlight on Wednesdays, and that's a new feature that we're adding to the channel, hopefully if you guys enjoy it, so make sure you leave comments down below if you do, and leave a like to this video as well, where essentially we're thinking, instead of showing off one of our own decks that we've crafted ourselves, we're going to look at a different deck that's been in the spotlight recently, hence the title of course. So Gallade Octillery has been a really well kept secret really by the Americans who have been pioneering the deck, but recently in a very interesting video by Sum1s PC on YouTube, I'll leave a comment in the description below and a few links to the video that they did and the channel itself, where Russell Lepar was one of the players who was really not only piloting but also sort of pioneering the deck itself. And it's a very interesting list, as you can see, so many crazy things going on as you just look down it, from Pokemon to energy count, all of it's kind of up in the air. Definitely the supporter lines are very wacky, so there's a lot going on in this build, and today we're going to look through and try and discuss some of the decisions that were made behind this deck and why certain things are in here. So the archetype itself, Gallade Octillery, it's managed 12 top cuts so far in City Championships, as well as 4 first place finishes amongst those 12, so definitely a viable deck, even though so few people actually know how to build it optimally, because as you can see, I've just mentioned how crazy the list is. I think very few people would have got a list close to this one unless they'd actually seen something like Russell's list in the first place. So huge credit to Russell Lepar, Daniel Watt and Fred Hoban. They are some of the pioneers of the deck, one of the most earlier guys, some of the early guys to play it basically and do well with it, so well done to all of those guys. Let's start running down this list. So what's this list all about? Well, we have the 4-1-4 line of Gallade. We know how strong Gallade is as a maxi target, but hey, it's actually quite easy to get this guy set up because he is a fighting type, so we can use Karina to find rare candy Gallade very, very consistently. And once we do have this up, he's a great attacker, big HP. Premonition is absolutely insane because it helps you get into all these kooky one-offs that we're playing. It also helps us find DCE on most turns so that we can chain attackers, and it helps us just find more combo pieces and sorts out our top decks in general. This is a fantastic ability. We all know why we like Gallade as a maxi target, so here we're just thinking, you know what, there's more than one way to get this guy out. Let's just use the traditional methods and try and rare candy into this stage 2 dude. Sensitive Blade is also a fantastic attack. It's amazing for killing Shaymins. That is one of the best ways this deck can win games, by trying to capture up multiple Shaymins to take prizes very quickly. And because we're playing no EX Pokemon in our deck at all, we're trying to win the race that way basically. So Gallade, absolutely fantastic for that. Just a really, really solid attacker with a great ability, all around good stuff, and easy search ability via Karina. And we also get to play Focus Sash. There's so many good things as to why Gallade can win games pretty much off his own back. So that is basically it. We're just using Gallade and then we're using other cards to complement him. So we've got the 2-2 Octillery line in here. Not sure which Octillery is the best one. At the moment I'm going for the Remoraid just so that you can discard awkward stadiums. Maybe if your opponent is playing Parallel City, gets that down early. That could be one of the most awkward ones. There's not too much that this deck doesn't like in terms of stadiums, but if it's your first turn, most of the time you're just going to pay retreat anyway, so it's not a big deal. The other one allows you to switch for as the attack, but you never want to do that. You just pay retreat anyway, so I feel this one's slightly more versatile. Tiny note on that. I can't remember which one the guys showed in their video, but that's the one I would pick. And we got the 2 Octillery as well. 90 HP makes it levelable, searchable. Huge thumbs up because we are playing for levelable for that exact reason. And Abyss Hand allows us to draw until we have 5 in our hand. So keeping us going very, very nicely in combination with Gallade, because we can look at the top 5 and maybe we're only drawing 1 or 2 with the Octillery, but that's the 1 or 2 cards we really want. So you can see straight away, every turn we get Premonition, we get Abyss Hand, and potential for multiple of those as well once we start filling up our bench. So it's absolutely disgusting once this gets working. So ruthlessly efficient, you will not miss cards like ever, because it's just so beautiful, this combination. And you can see already that The draw engine is just amazing, and without Shaymin as well, you wouldn't think a deck can work this consistently. But with the combination of these two cards, you can really get through the deck nicely, and in the sort of right manner as well. You're not drawing cards just for the sake of cards and hoping to hit cards. You're using Premonition, getting exactly what you need via Abyss Hand, so very fantastic. The next two things we're having is one Hawlucha. It's a fighting type, so it's a target for Karina. One criticism about having such a high Karina count is that a lot of the time we don't actually want to take Gallade. Karina basically just becomes a weak version of Skylar. So Hawlucha helps us out in the early turns to at least get an extra target that isn't Gallade. And he's a free retreater, and he actually is a decent attacker with that flying press for just 60 damage. It can help out against stuff like Yveltal EX, where we can't one-shot them with Gallade, even with combinations of Muscle Band and Giovanni, because of the resistance that they have. So as an attacker, he's pretty handy as well, Hawlucha. Pretty good against stuff like Toad as well, especially because it takes us a while to get set up against Toad. We only have one Curlier to actually get ourselves into Gallade, so Hawlucha is pretty important in that matchup alone. You could up it to multiple Hawlucha if you are more worried about Seismitoad, or you could just increase your Curlier count as well. So those are a couple of options based on your area, I guess, because obviously Seismitoad and other Trainer Lock, like Vespiquen Vileplume, I think that's one of the worst matchups for this deck, other than anything that plays Wobbuffet, because we are so reliant on getting Gallade, which means we're very reliant on Rare Candy. But that's a different story. One Hawlucha, pretty nice. It's just a free retreater in between things, as well as having a decent attack. And we are playing one Jirachi. This is indeed for the Seismitoad matchup, because we can discard those special energies, try and break the Quaking Punch lock. If they do decide to reattach DC and go for another Quaking Punch, well, they've just lost another energy straight away with Jirachi. So basically we're forcing our opponent, if they are playing Seismitoad, we're forcing them to break their own lock, which is fantastic, because then we start getting rare candies, then we start getting Gallades, and then everything looks good from there. So Jirachi's fantastic. We only play one, but it can be enough a lot of the time, because we are playing one Rod and one Sacred Ash as well, so you can have multiple options to get Jirachi back and reuse him in those sorts of situations against Toad and against Giratina, because this deck is very reliant on double colourless energy. So Jirachi as a one-of is absolutely fantastic. It also gives us options against stuff like Vespiquen and Night March, because we are again discarding double colourlesses where these energy are so vital to the strategy. We have good prize denial in this deck because we are using focus sashes. We can oftentimes get rid of all 4 DC from our opponent's board before they've taken all 6 prizes, especially because we have no EXs to for them to sort of race us against. So we should just win races against mostly non-EX decks, because we'll have the option to capture their own Shaymins, and of course we can use Jirachi to try and fatigue them almost. So a really good twofold strategy against other non-EX decks, because most of the non-EX decks right now are solely reliant on double colourless energy. Some Night March and some Vespiquen play Bronzong, but that's still pretty slow, and we have the option to Lysander. Similarly, we can do the same thing against Feebas and Milotic. So Jirachi, if we use him multiple times in those sorts of games, we're probably going to have a good time, and we have the option to fatigue them definitely. So it's one to keep an eye out on, and it's basically an extra win condition potential in just one card in the deck, which is absolutely fantastic. So I really do appreciate the inclusion of Jirachi. It serves so many purposes in here for just a one-of. So let's look at some of these crazy trainers. Yeah, so we've got the one Sacred Ash and one Super Rod. I think it's just so that you can guarantee yourself to have more Gallade pieces throughout the games. It's so that you can definitely get back Remoraid pieces as well. Octillery is so important, so if you prize pieces, very important to get one back if it is Lysander KO'd, because it is the whole engine with Gallade. It's a 2-part engine really. Premonition on its own isn't as strong if you can't just simply top deck back into them. So yeah, you sort of need the Octillery to help us out a little bit more. An option could be playing Unknowns. I know Unknowns are like a one-use deal compared to Octillery, which stays on the board forever. But Unknown's a bit faster, and if you were... Because a lot of the time you find Gallade before you find the Octillery. You can use Premonition with an Unknown as well. Something that like the Maxi builds often play. They often play stuff like Acrobike and Unknown. this deck is much more reliant on the Octillery, and it's an interesting decision that they didn't play any unknowns. But you can see why. Like, they'd rather fill their bench space with stuff like these for more permanent reasons. But just while you're trying to set those up, I would like to see at least 1 or 2 unknowns in here, especially because you have the recovery of Pokemon, such a high amount of Pokemon recovery as well, and you have level ball. I think 1 unknown may not be out of place in this list. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, the recovery cards. You just want to recycle your Gallades, recycle your Octilleries, and the important matches you can recycle Jirachi as well. You also get to recycle potentially 3 energy if you are up against energy denial decks, which could be a pain for you. So 1 of each, so that if you are... it's not like you have to be worried about sycamoring them away early or anything, because the only discard card in the whole deck is Ultra Balls, so you're always going to get usage out of both of these. You could potentially go down to 1. I will be showing off an altered list momentarily after this one, where I've made a few changes here and there to show what I would be playing. But yeah, these two quite interesting. Another really interesting one of is Target Whistle. This has been hailed as one of the best cards in the deck, one of the most effective cards to swing matchups. Basically, you're going to try and pick off another Shaymin. Once you kill one, Target Whistle it back to the bench, Lysander it back up, take 2 more prizes. It's just a great way to race, and it basically forces your opponent to not play down a single Shaymin and also not discard a single Shaymin, because Target Whistle can punish them. So absolutely fantastic for racing ahead. You don't want to play more because you don't need to, but just having 1 in the deck for most games is absolutely clutch. So that's a pretty awesome card as well, just to help us race. Make it a lot easier for Gallade, because in this build, they've decided to be kind of defensive and have a higher sash count than they have muscle band count. So there are some Gallade builds where people will have a high muscle band count and then sometimes play stuff like Fighting Stadium or another Giovanni or something like that, where they're looking to definitely get 1 hits on everything. This is more sort of stally. We'll make sure that your opponent has to hit twice through a non-EX, and in that time we can potentially get Lysanders for KOs and whatnot. It's a lot more defensive, but a lot more sort of stable, because it's a lot nicer keeping a stage 2 around for guaranteed 2 turns, or at least it forces them to have stuff like Zerosic, which not many people are playing right now. So I really like this concept with the focus sashes. A couple other one-offs. Escape Rope. I know in the video they discussed how this could be swapped out for a Floatstone. Escape Rope is basically, the mentality is so that we can get around other people using Jirachi, because DC is so important. I can see it working, but Floatstone does seem to be the more permanent solution, so that's a change that I should be making in the next list. 1 Enhanced Hammer as well. It's again for Giratina. You don't want them to chain Chaos Wheels whenever, because it's a big pain. It's also pretty good against stuff like Charizard Entei. It's a very difficult matchup, Charizard Entei, so being able to get rid of a DCE from them can really help you out. It forces them to use another Blacksmith rather than use like a Lysander that like the following turn and stuff like that. So it forces them to hit through sashes and stuff, which is pretty cool. So Enhanced Hammer as a one-of is pretty tasty alongside Jirachi as well. You can completely strip a Giratina of all its energy and buy yourself a number of turns to use Gallades, which is pretty awesome. So another nice one-of. I think it's more sort of a meta call playing Enhanced Hammer. It's another one of these cards that could be switched out for a consistency booster, but at the moment it features in their list. An interesting one-of that we normally see maxed out to 4 copies is a single Ultra Ball. Ultra Ball is in here more to thin out clunky cards than anything else, so that we can lower our hand size to get more cards from Octillery. In terms of a search card, we can use it, I guess, but oftentimes Karina can find our Gallade, and Level Ball can find every other piece in the deck, so it's actually probably our weakest in terms of search cards, believe it or not. And yeah, it's more so that once we've got usage out of something like a Bridget, we can discard one of those later on in the game. We can discard something that's just sort of clogging. If we're up against something like a Sceptile or a Manectric, we can get rid of the Enhanced Hammer, stuff like that. Ultra Ball helps us lower the hand size so that we continue to get value out of Premonition plus Abyss Hand. So a 1 inclusion for something that you wouldn't really expect, but I guess it is an additional search card. It's effectively another ball searcher for the early game. If you have missed Bridget, These ball cards are very important to flood the field of Rolts as quickly as possible, as well as trying to get an early Remoraid down, so I like having the extra ball in here. It's a very good idea from them. So they're also playing 3 Trainer's Mail. It's going to help you reach to find more Bridgets, which is important, and just in general keeps you ticking over. 36 total trainers in the deck gives you a lot of options for this card, so especially because when you keep using Karina, you're limited to how many things you can get, of course, but Trainer's Mail can help you get additional cards, so I like having that as well. It's like a mini Karina as well, like sort of, so it's pretty decent. Maxing out the VS Seeker, pretty standard stuff. You want to have Lysanders on every opportunity basically, because Lysander's probably the best way that we can win games just on prize trade alone, so that's very awesome. Obviously recycling other supporters at times can be useful. We have the 1 Giovanni in here. This is to help us reach once again. It means we can hit better numbers. It means that we can one-hit Crobats, which is pretty important if we're up against stuff like Manectric Bats or Fighting Bats, because Crobat can be an issue for the deck. Obviously it breaks focus sashes on Gallades, and it also has weakness on Gallade, so if they're able to use Sneaky and Surprise Bites to hit 50 on Gallade, then Muscle Band up a Crobat, they can actually one-hit us, so that's a bit worrying. So a Giovanni in here lets us respond to that Crobat immediately with another Gallade, which is pretty cool. It's the same reason why we play the 1 Muscle Band, really. Other things that have 130 and resist, things like Baby Yveltal, so it's nice once again to have Giovanni's scheme to overpower those in a efficient manner, rather than just not playing the focus sash down. Sometimes you'd rather use the Giovanni. Plus it's one of these cards where again, you can draw up to 5 if you don't have your Octillery going, so it can combo with Premonition. Also, just in general, it's one of these cards where if you're not in the position to use any of your other supporters, Giovanni's just one to use so that Sensitive Blade gets the bonus of 70 without really affecting the state of your hand. Like, if you don't want to use Judge, if you don't want to waste a Karina, or like waste a VS Seeker but you're holding Giovanni, you can play it just to increase your output with the Sensitive Blade, so it increases the overall support account, which is nice. We're playing 2 Bridget. This has been sometimes talked about as one of the most important cards of the deck. It's definitely the one you want to see in your opening hand as often as possible, although it is very clunky later on, so it's kind of a mishmash. That's why they're only playing 2 in here, because although it is crucial early on, it also sucks later on in the game because you never want to draw into it. Because it's clunky, you can't get rid of it very easily with only 1 Ultra Ball to discard cards. It's whenever you're top decking into it, it means you're not getting, like, you're losing a card from Abyss hand each turn, which is pretty ugly. So only the 2, but once you do hit Bridgets early on, you flood the field perfectly to set your board up for the rest of the game, pretty much. 2 Judge as well. Judge is fantastic when you have the combination. So you use a Judge to disrupt your opponent, and then you Premonition and Abyss hand your way out of the lock for yourself, and you've pretty much sorted out your own hand quite happily, and your opponent is hopefully left with a very weak hand, so that's pretty strong. 2 Lysander, we've said how important that is, and 4 Karina, it's again really nice. Oftentimes early game, if you see it instead of Bridget, it's like a mini Bridget, because you get Hawlucha and oftentimes a level ball to hit more Rolts or Remoraid, whatever you need really. And then also turns like 2, 3, 4, Karina can find Gallade Rare Candy combo, which is fantastic for flooding the field of as many Gallades as possible, so pretty handy there. So the tools, Focus Sash is huge, forces things like Megaphone, which isn't overly played right now. I know it's coming back into favour just because of the popularity of Charizard Entei, but they still need to sort of have that out. Also, I guess Zerosic works, but again, it's something that's played in very few decks at the moment. Or of course Bats, that's the main way that people break sashes at the moment. So that's something to worry about, but if it's a deck that doesn't play those things, Focus Sash gets ridiculous value, so that's really awesome. The Muscle Band, similar to the Giovanni. Interestingly enough, if you play them both in combination, you can hit 170 with Gallade. So that's pretty good to bear in mind. You can reach and kill some EXs quite easily, so that's pretty perfect. Energy count is simple. 4 DCE is the most important. Of course, it fulfills the attack in 1, but we also have the 5 fighting. I originally thought this was pretty high, but you sort of need it against Giratina. Obviously, Giratinas can't one-hit you, so you do have the sort of time to set up 2 single energy attachments to a Gallade. So that's something we can do, and of course it works with Hawlucha as well. So that's the list. I really like the ingenuity around it. Like, imagine just picking up a deck without any Sycamore and no Shaymin, and you think, how on earth does this thing work? But when you actually sit down and start playing with this, it's actually pretty fun, fairly consistent as well. So I really like what they've done with this, and yeah, I just think it's a really good deck to spotlight. It's deservedly getting a lot of wins because it's quite versatile in what it can achieve. There are times when your opponent's overextending just to break sashes, and maybe they're getting rid of resources, and things like Jirachi can come in and steal wins. There are times when just being Gallade on its own and having the combination with Octillery wins you games because your hand is permanently better than your opponent's, so it's going to help you race them a lot quicker. So I really like the list. This was like a starting list for them, I think. This is the list that they showed off in their video at least, but they did mention how they changed counts of things throughout the weeks and whatever. So I'm just going to flick out of this one and let's go to version 2.0, which is the build that I've changed a little bit just based on a few things. So let's talk about a few changes. Firstly, I've gone up to 4 Bridget. They mentioned how important Bridget is and how often they will win if they hit Bridget turn 1, so it made a lot of sense for me to play 2 Bridget. So because we're playing more Bridget, which equals more dead cards, I've gone up to 2 Ultra Balls, so we can kill more dead cards like more easily, so that we continue to get value from the Abyss hand plus Gallade. I think it's fine. It's not been too much of a worry having multiple Ultra Ball. Obviously you don't need to play them, but it also helps out because I've cut down a Karina in the process, making more room for Bridgets. So we have still 5 outs to get into like Candy Gallade, or at least to find Gallade. So I'm pretty happy with that. So that's one of the main changes. We have also added in the Floatstone that I mentioned. That's just come in for the Escape Rope. I've also cut the Enhanced Hammer and switched it out for Megaphone, just because of the struggle this deck has against Charizard Entei. I found when playtesting with Jack that you can just put Assault Vests onto your Shaymins as the Entei Charizard player and really ruin the outs for Gallade to win. It makes it very, very difficult. Like, 1 Vest on the Entei means we can't do much good there. Obviously Charizard's going to take multiple hits as well, and each turn they can easily dish out enough to either pop the sash that we're playing or just one-hit Gallades from anywhere. So I feel like it is a difficult matchup, Charizard Entei, but being able to Startling Megaphone away all those tools so that you can kill Enteis in response and so that you can kill Shaymins that are on the bench, it's pretty important. We've stuck with the Target Whistle. We've cut down on 1 Super Rod and decided to keep the Ash. I think just because the amount of Pokemon, I think the Ash is slightly superior. Again, this could be switched out for the Super Rod. Overall, I feel like we only need 1 of those 2 cards. So it's a personal preference whether or not you want to play that. What else have I done? I've cut some of the techie supporters. I've cut the Giovanni, which does limit our options slightly in terms of reaching for KOs and dealing with Crobats and such. But I felt just a more consistent build overall is probably going to be the best way to negotiate this. So we've upped the Trainer's Mail count. Because I've gone to 4 Bridget, I've also cut a Level Ball down to 3. I think that makes enough sense because Level Ball's still really strong for getting the Octilleries, so you still want to see them quite regularly. Good for finding Curlier as well, so plenty of reasons why I still like Level Ball in high counts, even though we do have the Bridget. So that is my list, and the list that we're going to jump into a game with now. So yeah, I just wanted to show off this deck because I was like, after seeing results with Gallade Octillery, I was really thinking about making decks and stuff, but I never found it to work for me, and that's because I was nowhere near a list like that. I was thinking way too standard, putting in a Shaymin, putting in multiple Sycamores, and it's just not the way to build this deck. So this is an education in itself, just seeing their list and going off of it, because they gave us a really good starting point. So let's see how this game goes. We're up against Marcelo, and we're flipping a coin here. And we win the flip, so that's pretty good. We can go first here. And let's see what we get. We are leading with double Rolts, which is pretty strong. And we also have Karina, which looks like a pretty good hand here. Depends what we get off the Trainer's Mail. If we can either top deck or get Bridget off the Trainer's Mail, this is like a dream hand. Kind of one of the reasons why we play as high a Bridget count as possible and for Trainer's Mail. Because, as you can see, like, Bridget will just absolutely... Oh, wow. Top deck Bridget. I play it before the Trainer's Mail because I'll definitely be using this. And I mean, at this point, how do we lose the game? So it looks like we've prized one Remoraid. We've only seen Shaymin from our opponent, so I'm not sure if I want to go all out with Roltz's. I think I should, just because Roltz is super weak. And you can expect them to die. So we will attach a regular fighting to the Rots on the bench, because obviously we can't attack and we can keep the DC for next turn. And here, off the Trainer's Mail, we can just hit another Karina or take VS Seeker. I think the other Karina's better because VS Seeker could be used later, and we don't need Bridget from now on. Or at least for the next few turns, so... we can pass it over and see how our opponent can break down this board state. Be interesting to see what they're playing. We see Mewtwo sleeves, so that could be interesting. Mewtwo is a very interesting matchup, actually. Especially if they have damage change. It literally means we will not be attacking until we can hit Lysanders. But our opponent's starting Shaymin is fantastic for us. We see a fighting stadium, so it might be fighting bats. And if it's bats, we could have an awkward time here. We'll see what our opponent does. Opponent uses an Ultra Ball. And they find a Lucario, so it looks like a pretty standard fighting bats, I guess. Could even be fighting hammers. Haven't seen any bats yet. Super Scoop Up is an indication, once again, that there's bats in here, but the Super Scoop Up gets tails, so we're in great shape because we can do the perfect combo of grabbing Gallade, and we can also grab Rare Candy. I'm just going to scout. Target Whistle is in here. We have some Focus Sash. We do have Startling Megaphone as well. But this is looking pretty perfect. So we're going to Candy the active, of course, into Gallade. The Fighting Stadium might even help us out for helping us reach against their Lucarios. So we want to use Premonition, and I'd love to put a level ball on the top here. That would be the ideal. Judge is not great. I might just take Trainer's Mail, then use Karina next turn, and then use Trainer's Mail after it. I think that's the best thing we can do here. We don't really need Sash. Like, the Lucario won't be killing us anyway. So next turn, if I go Karina for Candy, Gallade again, Trainer's Mail hoping to find Level Ball, because then we want to... I could even just Karina for the Level Ball itself, depending on how much we need to draw next turn. But we can just go for Sensitive Blade, take the first two prizes on turn 2. Hopefully we can pluck Remoraid out of here, because it's just great for board state. We get Bridget and Focus Sash. So it might even be that we go for Ultra Ball next turn. So we see another energy, and then Den get benched so that he can get more off of Corkscrew Smash. It makes sense. So, of course, we're top decking into Trainer's Mail. We'll be using Karina here. And I think I want to discard... I think I want to use Ultra Ball alongside getting a Gallade here. Yeah. So the idea here is we will try and find ourselves... I don't think we need Muscle Band. I'd rather keep Sash for later, and I can attach it to a Roltz without it having any effect yet. Just a -1 from hand. So we'll evolve into Octillery. We can put a sash on one of our dudes. I may as well put it on this Roltz. We'll go for a Trainer's Mail, looking for Candy. We do hit Candy, which is fantastic. We also hit Lysander, but we've already used Karina, and I'd rather not kill the Den. I'd rather take all EX knockouts as our path to victory here. So we can use Premonition. So next turn, I want the fighting energy for next turn. We have Karina off the VS Seeker. I'll take Level Ball just so that we can get a Curlier this turn as well. So this is looking pretty promising for us. Can use that Abyss Hand, of course. And I mean, you can see how nicely this is ticking along now. Just absolutely perfect. We've got 2 Gallades going. We're setting up another one. We can attach the fighting energy this turn. And we're doing 150 to this. Oh, we have another Premonition to use as well. So we can guarantee another Gallade. Yep, that seems good. And then, so if we're using Gallade, then I'll be judging after that. So it doesn't matter what for the rest of order. So we will just use Sensitive Blade for 150. And again, our opponent's still yet to take a prize. Our board state is just getting stronger and stronger. They've not found any bats yet. And until that point, we're not going to be in too much danger. I think unless he sort of super scoop ups or heals this Lucario, we should win prize trade, no problem. And like, if he does pick up that Lucario, how is he going to kill the active Gallade? So I think we're in good shape here. Really good shape, because this is just an amazing deck. There are a few worry signs for this deck. One is the fact that Vespiquen Vileplume is becoming a deck. Very interesting article about that was made just the other day. Oh, there's a Zubat. And we see Level Ball as well, so he might be flooding the field of Zubats at last. Another worry is Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet shuts off Gallade's ability and Octillery's ability. And as you can see, our supporter lines are really bad if we don't have these two things online. So we have to wait until we hit like Lysanders and stuff, which is really awkward. Our opponent plays Karina after attaching to Den. They find a Hawlucha, which is very not useful, but they also find Super Scoop Up, probably looking to heal this Lucario here. Unfortunately getting Tails. That's 2 Tails for our opponent. Chooses to bench Hawlucha, which is kind of worrying. Only one more slot for us to potentially use Target Whistle, but we haven't seen that just yet. So our opponent uses Corkscrew Smash to get a few more cards, and he has to take a prize as well. If he would be so kind, that would be lovely. So yeah, this deck is absolutely insane. I'm really glad I spotlighted it. I think it's such a cool deck. And Gallade is one of my favourite cards, and just being able to use him like this is just amazing. So, as we know, we can take another Gallade here. And, okay, we could VS Seeker Karina for Target Whistle this turn, because we know we're taking 2 prizes. Yeah, I think I want to do that, and then we'll Premonition our way into Lysander for next turn. That seems like a decent plan. Let's take Gallade. No, let's take Hawlucha so that I can just insta-play it so we get more off Octillery. And we'll take Target Whistle. And we'll use Target Whistle. Force the Shaymin EX down. Obviously, Fighting Bats doesn't play DCE, so he can't just Sky Return his way out, but he might be able to use a whatchamacallit, Super Scoop Up. We've seen that he plays them already. So these aren't the most helpful things we could get off Octillery, so we will oops. Oh, for goodness sake. We'll rearrange, use Octillery and then rearrange again and see if we can top deck Lysander next turn off of the next top 5. Not the most likely, but not too horrible if we don't have that available to us. Do I take Jirachi just to bench it? Probably. It's one less out in the deck, and it's something else for our opponent to worry about. So now we'll use our other Premonition. You can see that we have quite long turns just because of the abilities that we have at our disposal. We don't actually hit what we want to hit, which is a shame. So which card can reset our top decks? None of them. That's pretty awkward. So in that case, we already have Judge in hand. Can we get use of... We can't really use Startling Megaphone. I'd like to take a card that we could just play. But nothing seems too helpful here, so I guess I'll just give myself the option to VS Seeker. But we haven't got Lysander in there just yet, which is a shame. But nonetheless, we're taking 2 more prizes here. And maybe one of those cards could help us reset our top decks. We see Remoraid and we see Level Ball. So that resets a top deck, which is pretty good. So we can lower our hand 1, 2, 3. So we'll still have 3, 4. Which gives us only 1 top deck off of Octillery next turn. Oh dear. Well, it's not like we're in a bad spot. It just means I can't win next turn. We see a Golbat evolve. Targeting down the Gallade, of course, breaking our sash. Things are still looking pretty peachy here. Our opponent has to take 5 physical prizes before we take... Just kill that Shaymin. Like, before we just find a Lysander, that's all we need. Unless our opponent finds Super Scoop Up and hits heads on it here to, like, pick up Shaymin. We see Focus Sash, that's really not a worry. That's all he takes, wow. Attaches it to Hawlucha, retreats anyway, and goes into the den. That makes 0 sense to me. And our opponent just hits us with Energy Short for 40. So, we can... Where's Floatstone best here? Probably Octillery. We're going to fail search the Level Ball. We're going to attach an energy to get it out of the hand. May as well be Jirachi. Can use Premonition looking for Lysander. So we do miss, but Trainer's Mail can help us get it next turn. Or do I just want another Gallade? No, no need for another Gallade. So what we're going to do now is Abyss Hand for 1. And then we're going to Premonition the top again. Oh no, we need to... So yeah, now we have the extra 1 card that could be a Lysander, and it is. Wow. So we got it. Amazing. So that was pretty quick work, just killing 3 EXs in 4 hits, I guess, 4 attacks. Obviously our opponent started Shaymin, which is awkward, but most decks rely on Shaymin to help set them up, so that's the whole premise of this deck. preying on Shaymins, which pretty much everyone plays. So there we go, we take our 2 last prizes, and that is victory, guys. So huge props to those guys for making the deck, and like I say, those very interesting videos will be in the comment section below. And that was my sort of version 2.0. It was a really just more less teched out. So it's basically like if it's a blind meta, my one seems to be more consistent. The only real tech in here is the megaphone for Entei Zard, but that's about it. So that is the list. If you want to copy my one, please feel free to do so. If you want to try out Russell's, I'm sure that's a great list as well. So there we are, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. It's a good way to get extra content out there with me doing a lot less work because I'm just stealing someone else's list and changing a few cards. But there we go. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think. It's been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you guys next time.